Hello, and welcome to the final episode of the year. It is kind of a dark time right now, and I'm not just saying that because the sun is setting at 4:30 p.m. This is the first episode that we've written post the election. And knowing the general demographic of this channel's audience, I imagine most of you are probably going into the new year a little uneasy. And same here. I am merely a humble internet movie guy. I can't actually fix things. Unless I create a video essay about Batman Beyond so beautiful that it changes the tenor of the entire country and unites us all as one. No, I can't actually fix things. As an internet movie guy, the most anyone can really ask from me is to not have terrible, harmful views and be a gateway for young nerds angry about Disney movies to get into far-right politics. As I call it, the Mater to MAGA pipeline. But in dark times like these, what can I actually do? Stress out and eat 24 cookies in one sitting? Yes, of course. But also, I can be a distraction. And let's be real, now and then, or all the time, we can use those. So for the next 20 to 30 minutes, we're gonna chill out here and do the dumbest, most low-stakes, highest cozy factor video essay of the year. Welcome to the episode about sweaters in movies. As someone who lives in the northeastern United States, I feel pretty confident saying that the best month of the year is October. Like, sure, it has Halloween, which did inspire one of the very best songs about graveyard smashes, but more importantly, October is the month where I pack up my summer clothes, put them into storage, and release the sweaters. Release the sweaters. I hate dressing for summer. It is a struggle every year. I will die before I wear a tank top. Every year, I just crave the arrival of colder weather when I can cover my body in thick layers of figure-obscuring knitted wool. If you watch this channel, or follow me on social media, or have ever met me in person, you probably know I'm something of a sweater enthusiast. I'm like Sonny Crockett, and sweaters are my mojitos. I'm like Bleeding Gums Murphy, and sweaters are my Fabergé eggs. I'm like the characters in Trainspotting, and sweaters are my heroin. Okay, maybe that one was a little bit too extreme, but the point is, this year I bought 3 sweaters over the summer while they were on sale, and then I got 2 more earlier this month, and then finally had to cut myself off. I have enough, at least until next year, or until my experiment to give myself 4 more arms is complete. As I got more into knitwear in recent years, I started paying more attention to it on screen. Earlier this year, I got brunch with Jacob Geller while he was visiting New York, and in our conversation, I made a joke that I should do a video about sweaters in movies. And then this joke idea sat and festered in my brain, and now 8 months later, here we are. This may seem like an absurd topic, but once you start thinking about it, you realize it's actually an extremely cool and intelligent one. I mean, you can immediately picture a whole bunch of beloved cinematic sweaters. Knives Out is arguably the most recent champ of sweater cinema. Like, people act like Chris Evans invented the Aran sweater. But of course, there's also When Harry Met Sally, the definitive autumn New York movie, which is impressive when you consider there's an actual movie called Autumn in New York. There's Home Alone, Harry Potter, The Lighthouse, The Shining, The Holiday, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, Love Actually, the whole filmography of Daniel Craig, everything in that one scene with Aquaman in Norway in Zack Snyder's Justice League. If you think I'm crazy, here's a feature Vogue did on iconic movie sweaters. And Vulture did one too. So did People magazine. See, I'm not crazy. I am cool and normal, just like these esteemed publications. Now, I know this could easily spiral out of control and become a video all about costume design and wardrobe in film, which we are not going to do. I have tackled topics that have gotten way out of hand before, and I've learned my lesson. But I do think there is something unique about the sweater, both in real life and on film. And a great sweater can add more to a film than you might think. By the way, this video is sponsored by Nebula, who I love. We just made a movie together, but I just want to say, I would really love to get a clothing brand who makes sweaters as a sponsor in the new year. I mean, really, I just want some free sweaters. Is that the entire reason I'm making this video? As a desperate plea for free knitwear to fuel my addiction? I mean, it's not true. So just throwing this out there, I'm a big fan of sweaters by the following brands: Bosey, Howlin, J-Press, Todd Snyder, O'Connell's, but really, I'm open to sweater sponsorships from pretty much anyone, especially a company like De Bon Facteur, because their sweaters look so nice, but they're also expensive and out of my price range, so I can't justify buying one. So anyway, in 2025, let's get Patrick a sweater sponsorship. So what is it about sweaters? Why do I love them so much? Well, we'll get into that, but first, a quick history. For hundreds of years, until the early 20th century actually, sweaters were only ever worn for function, not for fashion. Originally called Guernseys, they were worn by fishermen to keep warm, which is what led to the cable knit patterns and stitching resembling various knots used at sea. So yeah, it was the guys like Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe in The Lighthouse who changed fashion forever. Near the end of the 1800s, as outdoor activities like golf and boating grew in popularity, it made sense for people to have warm, comfortable clothing that wasn't restrictive, leading to the mainstreaming of the sweater, which would then explode in popularity during the 1930s and 40s. Diana Vreeland, Vogue editor in the 1960s, called sweaters, quote, the 20th century's unique contribution to fashion. She was actually referring to a sweater paired with a skirt, but whatever, I say ditch the skirt, she is 100% right about the sweater. There is the very simple fact that they're warm, so wearing one when it gets a bit chilly feels great. But there is so much more to them than that. There is a history and culture and artistry that you definitely are not gonna get from graphic tees. The weight and feel of sweaters are essential. The region they come from is essential. People get really nerdy about denim, and yeah, I get that. But honestly, I just think sweaters are way more fun. Most of the time, jeans just look like jeans. Not the case with sweaters. You watch a movie like Dunkirk, and you're like, holy shit, look at all these fucking sweaters. The ribbed white turtleneck, and the burgundy fisherman sweater, and the Fair Isle sweater vest, and the chunky blue Guernsey. It's got a bit of everything. There is variety. So after months and months of study and research and real first-hand experience wearing sweaters, I have determined that the greatness of knitwear comes down to three components, which also extend to their function in cinema. The impact and quality of a sweater depends on how well these three components are represented. Number one is shape. A sweater is a thick layer that covers the entire torso, sometimes also the neck. It can transform a person's silhouette, immediately creating a bulkier upper half. These iconic looks from When Harry Met Sally come from the big chunky sweaters on top and slimmer pants on the bottom. Sweaters are one of the only articles of clothing where wearing a size too big can actually look good. In Knives Out, the oversized Aaron sweater does a lot of work covering up Chris Evans's Captain America physique and making him look at least a little bit more like a normal person. And of course, there is the other iconic oversized Aaron sweater, the one Masato Hagawara wears in Cure. In a 1996 piece for GQ, Tom Junod wrote, "The turtleneck is the most flattering thing a man can wear because it strips a man down to himself, because it forces a man to project himself. The turtleneck does not decorate like a tie or augment like a sport coat, or in any way distract from what my father calls a man's presentation. Rather, it puts a man in sharp relief and puts his face on a pedestal, first literally, then figuratively. It is about isolation, the turtleneck is. It is about essences and first causes. It is about the body and the face, and that's all it's about." Now, I would actually broaden this and say a turtleneck is the most flattering thing anyone can wear. Women look great in turtleneck sweaters. It's the defining characteristic of Diane Keaton's character in Something's Gotta Give. And also, maybe Diane Keaton in real life too. The shape of the sweater's neck can also help define who a character is. No judgment about anyone's tastes here, but I personally am not a big fan of the quarter zip sweater, which immediately gives me dad vibes, and can easily lean into Republican dad vibes. So in Knives Out, costume designer Jenny Egan's choice to dress Don Johnson in one of these immediately tells me who he is before he says a single word. And in that same movie, the white V-neck sweater worn by the little Nazi child is a perfect touch. I'm not usually a big fan of V-neck sweaters, although I do have to give a big shout out to Michael Douglas's V-neck in Basic Instinct, which, lest we forget, he wears with no shirt underneath, and he wears it to a club. What a movie, what a sweater. Die Hard 2 is obviously nowhere near as good as Die Hard's 1 or 3, but the shawl collar sweater John McClane wears is maybe his best piece of costuming in the whole series. You see that, and you think, that's just a regular guy who got stuck in the situation. Definitely not an action hero who's going to stab a bad guy in the eye with an icicle. And while we're talking about the shape of sweaters, it must be pointed out that part of their rise in popularity in the 1930s and 40s was due to actresses who were nicknamed the Sweater Girls, like Lana Turner and Jane Mansfield, who wore form-fitting sweaters over cone-shaped bras. And look, I'm not trying to be a perv here, but all I'm saying is that you look at this, and yeah, you get why it made people's heads explode and the entire world go, "We love sweaters now!" In the great 1950 noir Gun Crazy, the studio correctly recognized how amazing Peggy Cummins looked in that sweater, especially with the big shoulders and the sleeves rolled up, so they just went and made that image the whole poster. Component number 2 is texture. This part might be even more important than shape, and this is also, heads up, where I'm going to be a bit of a snob, because this is where I think a lot of sweaters can just drop the ball and be boring. Like, sorry if you happen to be a big fan of thin merino wool sweaters, but by and large, those things are a whole bunch of nothing. If you put on a sweater over a button-down shirt and you can see the impressions of the buttons through the sweater, that's a bullshit-ass sweater. That shit is thin and textureless, and it's not even gonna keep you warm. In one scene in A Complete Unknown, which is shockingly really good, Bob Dylan says,
"For anyone who's gonna hold your attention on stage, you have to kind of be a freak. You can be beautiful or you can be ugly, but you can't be plain."
And I think the same idea applies to sweaters. If a sweater is going to be worthwhile, it has to have texture or a pattern to it. There has to be detail, something to look at. It needs visual interest. You may laugh at them, but ugly Christmas sweaters have inspired their own party theme, which is really big for one article of clothing. This is why my preference is always something like a Shetland sweater, which has this really soft, fuzzy layer that catches light really well. Or a chunkier knit where you can see the stitches. Or of course, some variation on an Aran fisherman sweater or Guernsey. And these qualities directly carry over to the screen. Texture has become something of a lost art in film. So much modern digital cinematography is flat and sterile. The cheap merino wool blend of cinema. Film grain, which gives every frame this moving, living energy, gives the visuals of a film a tactility, a detail that is just inherently more visually interesting. It's like looking at a Van Gogh painting like, ooh, look how chunky that paint is. That's film grain, and by extension, that's Shetland wool. And good sweaters on screen do the same thing. The texture and detail draws our eye in a way a plain cotton shirt wouldn't. Even when sweaters aren't handmade, they bring a handmade quality. Remember, these are knitwear, which originated as a mind-numbingly slow and difficult human process. And in good sweaters, you can sense a human touch in a way that you can't with most other clothing. It's an organic fabric, it comes from sheep's wool, and it gives the costuming an organic, handmade quality. In some cases, it really is. The incredible sweaters in The Banshees of Inisherin were all handmade by an 80-something woman named Delia Barry, who lives in County Wicklow, Ireland. They were made just like the actual sweaters in the 1920s would have been, also probably by one local woman who had been knitting her entire life. This gives the film a similar quality to what you get in stop-motion animation, where you can see the fingerprints from the animators on the clay figures. So what I'm saying is that good sweaters are like the practical effects of costume design, and cheap merino wool blends, they're basically this. Like in Anatomy of a Fall, which is one of the great knitwear movies of all time, just look at how the edges of Sandra Hüller's sweater catch the light here. That's all wool texture, baby. A cotton shirt is never gonna give you that. Texture can make sweaters memorable in movies that otherwise would never seem like sweater movies. Like, think of the sweaters they wear in the real world in The Matrix, or that light brown one Matt Damon wears in The Bourne Identity. Even if I hadn't just put the clips on screen, you can immediately picture those sweaters, and that's because the texture just makes them distinct. And of course, I have to mention, an extension of texture is pattern. For some reason, sweaters can get away with way crazier and louder patterns than most of us would ever wear on any other article of clothing. And so you can get amazing looks like the one Nino Castelnuovo wears in The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, or this one John Cusack wears in High Fidelity, and of course, the iconic looks from Judge Reinhold in The Santa Claus. And component number 3 is comfort. Beyond aesthetics, beyond looking really, really good, beyond just covering up our gross naked torsos, what is the purpose of sweaters? Well, fundamentally, it's warmth. As we established earlier, sweaters were originally worn just for function during outdoor work by the ocean in Ireland, Scotland, and England. These are countries with lots of sheep, where the wool can be turned into material to be knitted into layers to protect against the cold. Above all else, a sweater should keep you warm during the colder months of the year. It is, essentially, like a blanket made into a shape to wrap around your torso, holding you tight and protecting you from the elements. Baby, it's cold outside, but it sure is warm when you've got that big, chunky cable knit sweater on. And even in warmer climates, a sweater can look comfortable as hell. Like, look at the dude sweater in The Big Lebowski. Obviously, great shape, amazing texture and pattern, but above all, this looks comfortable. And the coziness of a sweater can also be weaponized, like when evil killers are dressed in them, like my boy Josh Hartnett in Trap, Hugh Grant in Heretic, and of course, this guy. A good sweater usually has some weight to it. You can really feel it when you put it on. It is the clothing equivalent of a hug. And that is the real idea here. As I thought about the idea of a sweater on screen, what it can mean and how it makes us feel, I started thinking about why we are so drawn to movies featuring lots of sweaters, especially around this time of year. Sure, Knives Out is a fun movie, but it's also a murder mystery about an awful dysfunctional family. So why is it comforting to watch? Why does it feel cozy? That's when I realized this whole thing went further. That sweaters are a gateway to understanding something that I am deciding now to call cozy cinema. We throw around the word cozy a lot, especially around this time of year, and everyone has their own definition. Like, as strange as it might seem to some people, I get how there's something oddly comforting about the editing rhythms and smooth, precise camera movements of David Fincher movies that makes them comforting to watch over and over, but I would also never call them cozy. Likewise, I don't think that a movie being nice or heartwarming is inherently the same as being cozy, although many cozy movies are also nice and heartwarming. I asked on social media what movies people consider cozy, and I got a whole range of answers. For instance, one guy said The Hateful Eight, which feels insane. That is a mean, violent, often very unpleasant movie about a bunch of terrible people killing each other. If anything, I guess it does kind of qualify as cottagecore for all of the loving detail in that cabin, and wait a second. Could we call it cottage gore? Okay, moving on. This got me thinking about what cozy actually means beyond just this vague feeling. Yes, curling up under a blanket by the fireplace is cozy, but how do you quantify that? Is cozy just a case of you know it when you feel it? Thinking about this, and what could possibly lead that raging psychopath in my mentions to say The Hateful Eight is cozy, it led me to a theory. I think that in most cases, coziness requires a harsh, cold, difficult environment or difficult experience. When we think cozy, we always think of the autumn or winter. To me, coziness implies taking shelter from the cold, or a break from difficult, stressful times. It's a reprieve. As the song goes, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And so think about it. The Hateful Eight is about some strangers taking shelter from the harsh blizzard, warming themselves by the fire, getting some food, and finding common ground and bonding over forged letters from Abraham Lincoln. Like, sure, it involves a bit of murder and some nasty, brutal violence, but whatever. The details don't really matter. And so, true coziness requires some degree of discomfort for the change to be noticeable. No one ever calls a movie set in the summer cozy. I mean, if your definition of cozy is just, it makes me feel nice, then fine, go ahead and call Mamma Mia cozy, but for me, no movie set on a very warm island off the coast of Greece is ever gonna be cozy. Cozy cinema generally requires a happy ending. Like, It's a Wonderful Life is rightly the greatest and most definitive Christmas movie, an inherently cozy movie. But remember that Jimmy Stewart goes through hell in that film. He loses his hearing in one ear, goes through decades of compromise and disappointment, is nearly driven to suicide, but it's the ending, when he comes inside from the snowstorm and finds community and love and warmth and family. That's cozy. The Wizard of Oz and There's No Place Like Home, that is as cozy an idea as you'll find in all of cinema. Home and family and love are the core ideas in cozy movies. In When Harry Met Sally or The Holiday, yes, the sweaters and the cottage and all that contribute a lot to the coziness, but it's the happy endings where the characters fall in love that really seals it. The Holdovers is the latest major addition to the cozy Kino canon, that's what I'm calling it, and that is a movie where the main characters are sad and lonely and miserable and also very cold for almost the entire movie. But it becomes cozy thanks to the unbeatable combo of meaningful human connection and terrific knitwear. My beloved Paddington movies are obviously peak cozy. They're about a lovely family of sweater-wearing people welcoming a new member into their very cozy home, and he's a bear, so it's like he's permanently wearing a sweater. I know Paddington wears a duffel coat, which is cozy, but I still think he should wear an actual sweater in the movies as well. Not a major criticism, just a minor one. And so, because I can't resist doing stuff like this, I made a rubric to help figure out whether a film makes it into the cozy Kino canon. Again, you can have your own personal canon. I will not show up at your house and tell you not to call something cozy, but by my personal standards and definition, this is my system. 10 questions to determine the level of coziness. How much does the movie feel like the cinematic equivalent of a blanket and/or hug? 1 to 5 points. Does anyone die? If so, subtract 2 points. Sorry to Little Women and Dead Poets Society. Is it set during the fall or winter? Add 3 points. Is there a fireplace? Add 3 points. How good are the sweaters? 1 to 5 points. How autumnal is the color palette? 1 to 5 points. Fantastic Mr. Fox really crushes here. How cozy is the primary home in the film? 1 to 5 points. Does anyone form meaningful relationships, be they romantic or platonic? 3 points. For 1 bonus point, is there hot cocoa? And finally, at any point, does a dad arrive home and hug his whole family while saying, "My Little Women"? 2 points. So viewers, go forth and add up the points and report back on what the coziest movies of all time are. And so as we arrive at the end of the episode, I asked myself, what was the point of all this? Is there any real thesis here beyond I like sweaters and I wanted to use this platform to ramble about a niche interest of mine? Maybe not. But folks, I'm tired. And it's cold outside, and this just seemed like the best way I could think of to close out 2024. But hey, maybe I got some of you to think a little bit more about knitwear than you have in the past. Maybe some of you will go out and buy yourself a nice Shetland. And maybe, just maybe, someone from a clothing brand that makes good sweaters is watching this and wants to send me some free sweaters in the new year. I can hope. Well, that does it for the last episode of the year. After this, I can finally take a bit of time off and relax because, folks, it has been a busy 12 months. It might not seem that way on this channel since there were no videos for October and November because during that time, I was off making a movie. In case you haven't heard, this is The Dinner Plan, a short film about half an hour long starring Griffin Newman, John Hodgman, Miriam Shore, Eudora Peterson, Jeffrey Cantor, Cindy Chung, and Zach Cherry. Even though this is a short, it is by far the biggest project I've ever made. We had a crew of dozens of people, we had months of pre-production, and now we are deep into post-production and about to picture lock. And I gotta say, the movie's looking really good. This movie was produced by Nebula, our sponsor for this episode, and it will premiere there in 2025. Because as you probably know, my goal has always been to make movies, not just to talk about them here. YouTube as a system is designed to encourage us to just do the same thing over and over again forever, but the folks at Nebula, from years of working with creators, understand that some of us do actually want to grow and do more and make bigger, more ambitious projects, We just lack the resources and structure around us to do it. And so we did it. We did a movie, and we're going to keep doing this. Beyond this one, which I can't wait for you guys to see, we are developing some incredibly cool projects for the next couple years. The videos aren't going away or anything, but there will be more great stuff along with them. Nebula is entirely funded by subscribers. You signing up helps fund our films, and if you use my link, I directly get a cut of that, so it supports me too. And for you, you just get a better experience because the regular videos are on Nebula with no ads, and there's also this entire new platform of things to watch. So there's my new movie, there's my other weird little micro-budget feature film, Night of the Coconut, there's all my bonus videos that are exclusive to Nebula, so if you haven't joined yet and for some reason want more of my voice, there is hours and hours more of just me talking about movies on there. So look, it's the end of the year. It's cold, and I assume that all you really want to do right now is stay inside and, you know, be cozy. So now is a pretty great time to join Nebula and just spend the winter binging stuff there. And if you use my link, here it is, it's also down in the description, you can click it, and there's a QR code you can scan. You get an entire year for 40% off, which comes out to only $3 a month, which I think is a very good deal. And then hey, you can gather the whole family around the TV and watch the Patrick H. Willems Star Wars Holiday Special. Or anything else, I don't know, I mean like, really, watch whatever you want. So folks, stay cozy in there. Thank you so much for watching, and Happy New Year.